The autumn of 1983 brought a chilling silence to the small military communities surrounding Fort Bragg, North Carolina. On a crisp November evening, as the last rays of sunlight faded from the sky, General Thomas Miller, a man whose life was dedicated to the unseen battles of the Cold War, vanished without a trace. For 36 long years, his disappearance remained an open wound, a mystery whispered about in hushed tones within the highest echelons of power. Then, in the spring of 2019, amidst the shifting earth of an old, forgotten cemetery, an unexpected discovery beneath the soil would shatter decades of silence and force the world to confront a truth far more disturbing than anyone could have imagined. What was found next to his buried remains would not only reveal his true fate, but expose a betrayal that threatened the very foundations of national security. Before we delve into this astonishing story of courage, conspiracy, and a relentless search for justice, we invite you to stay with us until the very end to uncover how this decades-old mystery finally found its resolution. Do not forget to subscribe to the channel and activate notifications so you do not miss any of our future investigations. Write in the comments section from which city you are watching this video. The mornings at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, in late 1983, often began with a crisp chill and the distant rumble of military exercises. For General Thomas Miller, a man of unwavering discipline and sharp intellect, each day was a precise sequence of routines, a reflection of the ordered world he sought to protect. A highly decorated tactician, his name was synonymous with strategic brilliance within the United States Army. His life was a testament to duty, his days consumed by the intricate dance of Cold War strategy, where every decision carried the weight of nations. He lived a life of quiet dedication with his beloved wife, Eleanor, and their young daughter, Sarah, a vibrant splash of innocence in a world of high stakes. The political climate of the 1980s was tense, a silent war of ideologies played out on intelligence maps and in covert operations, profoundly shaping the lives of men like General Miller. He was currently immersed in a project of paramount importance, a classified report detailing critical vulnerabilities in the nation's defense grid, a task that consumed his thoughts and often kept him working late into the quiet hours of the night. His meticulous nature ensured every detail was scrutinized, every potential threat assessed, a silent sentinel against the shadows lurking beyond the Iron Curtain. The morning of November 23, 1983, dawned clear and cool, a typical late autumn day in North Carolina. General Miller rose before the sun, as was his habit, the soft glow of his bedside lamp illuminating the pages of a technical manual. His routine was a fortress of precision, a brisk run through the quiet Fort Bragg streets before sunrise, a quick, steaming shower, and then the quiet ritual of dressing in his pressed uniform. Downstairs, the aroma of brewing coffee and Eleanor's signature blueberry pancakes filled the kitchen. He shared a brief, warm breakfast with Eleanor and Sarah. He remembered Sarah's small hand clutching his finger as he bent to kiss her forehead, a moment of profound tenderness that would later echo with unbearable poignancy. He looked at Eleanor, a silent acknowledgement of their shared life, their silent understanding of the burden his work carried. By 7:30 in the morning, General Miller was behind the wheel of his olive-green government sedan, the vehicle a standard-issue, unremarkable car that blended seamlessly into the military landscape. His destination was a civilian facility located just outside the Fort Bragg perimeter, a nondescript building that housed secure communication lines and highly sensitive data relays. It was a place he visited often, seemingly for routine updates or classified briefings. As he approached the main gate, he exchanged a brief, professional nod with the young military policeman on duty, a familiar face who waved him through without a second thought. The sun was just beginning to climb above the tree line, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns of the base. To all outward appearances, it was just another day in the disciplined life of a dedicated officer. There was no unusual haste in his movements, no visible sign of distress, only the calm, collected demeanor of a man heading to work. He drove out onto the public road, merging with the sparse early morning traffic, a single ordinary car on a path that would soon lead to an extraordinary and chilling mystery. No one saw anything amiss. No one suspected that this was the last time General Thomas Miller would be seen in his ordinary, predictable routine. The initial hours after General Miller's expected return passed with a familiar, comforting rhythm in the Miller household. Eleanor spent the afternoon tending to Sarah, reading stories, and planning dinner, assuming Thomas was simply delayed by the unpredictable nature of his top-secret work. It was not uncommon for his meetings to run long, or for him to be called away on an unexpected secure communication. But as twilight deepened into evening, and the cheerful sounds of Sarah's playtime faded into the quiet hum of the suburban home, a subtle shift occurred. The usual quiet anticipation turned into a growing unease. Eleanor glanced at the kitchen clock with increasing frequency, her mind replaying their brief morning conversation, searching for any hint of a change in his schedule. The dinner she had prepared, a favorite of Thomas's, remained untouched, its warmth slowly fading. By 8 o'clock, the familiar sound of his car pulling into the driveway remained absent. Eleanor's attempts to reach him on his secure office line met only with a terse automated response. Calls to his known colleagues yielded evasive answers, veiled in military protocol and the need-to-know basis that defined their world. General Miller is unavailable, or he is on an unscheduled detail, were the only replies she received, each one a small, cold shard of worry. The clock's steady ticking in the silence of the house became a relentless drumbeat against her mounting fear. By 9, her heart began to race. This was not normal. Thomas was always meticulously punctual, always considerate of her anxiety when his work took him away. The casual concern had morphed into a palpable dread, a cold knot tightening in her stomach. Finally, at 9:30, unable to endure the oppressive silence any longer, Eleanor made the call to the military police. Her voice, usually calm and composed, trembled slightly as she explained her husband's unusual absence. The officer on the other end, accustomed to similar calls about high-ranking personnel whose schedules often changed without warning, offered reassurances, suggesting a routine delay, perhaps a late-night secure brief. But Eleanor knew, with an icy certainty that defied logic, that something was profoundly wrong. That first agonizing night stretched into endless hours, each minute a testament to a fear she had never before truly known. The military police, initially dismissive, soon realized the gravity of General Miller's prolonged absence. The next morning, a full-scale investigation commenced, though it moved with a peculiar, almost deliberate slowness. The high-level nature of General Miller's work, steeped in classified intelligence and Cold War secrecy, meant that his disappearance was not treated like an ordinary missing persons case. Instead, it was enveloped in a shroud of official discretion, a need to avoid public alarm or potential international incidents. Interrogations began, quiet and methodical, starting with personnel at Fort Bragg, then extending to anyone who had seen the general on his last known day. Yet, their efforts seemed limited, constrained by invisible boundaries. Search parameters were narrow, focusing on the immediate vicinity of the base and the route to the civilian facility he was meant to visit. There was a palpable sense that certain avenues were simply not explored, deemed too sensitive or irrelevant by the military command. Meanwhile, Eleanor, a woman of formidable strength, refused to be confined by the official narrative. The initial reassurances had curdled into a bitter frustration. With a fierce determination, she launched her own desperate search. She contacted every friend, every acquaintance, every unofficial contact her husband had cultivated over his long career, hoping for a thread of information that the official channels seemed unwilling or unable to provide. Each phone call was met with a wall of polite but unyielding silence, a frustrating bureaucratic labyrinth that seemed designed to obscure rather than reveal. She hired private investigators, quietly, discreetly, pouring her personal savings into a quest for answers. But their efforts too met dead ends, their inquiries thwarted by the pervasive secrecy surrounding General Miller's professional life. It was during these agonizing early days that the first whispers began to circulate, hushed theories from former colleagues or anonymous tipsters. Some suggested a defection, a shocking betrayal that Eleanor vehemently rejected. Others hinted at a deep-cover mission gone terribly wrong, an unacknowledged sacrifice in the Shadow War. Each theory, regardless of its truth, added another layer of torment to Eleanor's already shattered world, deepening the mystery and tightening the vise of uncertainty around her heart. The general had simply vanished, leaving behind a family desperate for answers and an official silence that was deafening. The days after General Miller's disappearance bled into weeks, the weeks into months, and the months, with a cruel and unrelenting passage, into years. The initial flurry of military activity around the Miller home slowly dissipated, replaced by a suffocating silence. The official investigation, once a frantic search, dwindled to a cold case file, tucked away in a dusty archive deemed unsolvable. For Sarah, who had been a child of 5 when her father vanished, the absence became a defining feature of her life, a gaping void that shaped her understanding of the world. She grew up haunted by the unresolved grief, the chilling ambiguity of her father's fate. Other children had fathers who were present, or fathers whose passing was marked by a funeral, by a definite end. Sarah had only a ghost, a whisper of a man who was there one moment and gone the next, leaving behind only questions. She struggled with the unspoken fears, the way her mother's eyes would sometimes glaze over with a distant sadness, the way her own voice would catch when asked about her family. The legacy of her father's disappearance was not a clear memory, but a persistent ache, a wound that never truly healed. Eleanor, however, refused to surrender to the silence. Her love for Thomas, her unwavering conviction in his integrity, fueled a quiet, relentless crusade for answers. She became a solitary figure of perseverance, her hope slowly, agonizingly eroded by each passing year, yet never entirely extinguished. She transformed into an amateur archivist, her home office becoming a meticulous repository of newspaper clippings, declassified reports, and her own painstakingly kept journals. Every piece of information, every theory, no matter how remote, found its place in her growing collection. She learned to navigate the opaque corridors of government bureaucracy, filing endless Freedom of Information Act requests, pushing for re-examinations, refusing to let the case simply fade into obscurity. She attended conferences on cold cases, seeking advice from retired investigators and experts in intelligence. Her dedication bordered on obsession, a singular focus that both sustained her and isolated her. The Cold War, which had loomed so large in General Miller's life, cast a long, cold shadow over his vanishing. Disappearances of military personnel or intelligence operatives were not unheard of during those tense decades, often attributed to defection, capture, or deep cover missions that simply went dark. The prevailing narrative, reinforced by the military's tight-lipped responses, hinted at a scenario too sensitive for public disclosure. This ambiguous explanation, while convenient for the authorities, was a torment for Eleanor. It left Thomas's reputation in a perpetual limbo. Neither hero nor traitor, just a blank space in history. Friends offered condolences, but their eyes often held a hesitant pity, a silent question that Eleanor felt compelled to answer, even if only to herself. The Miller name became synonymous with the unsolved mystery, a family defined by an absence. For decades, Eleanor bore the weight of this uncertainty, her persistence a solitary beacon against the overwhelming darkness of official silence and the passage of time. She aged, her hair silvering, lines of worry etched around her eyes, but the fire of her determination, though banked, continued to smolder, waiting for the smallest spark of truth. The world moved on. The Cold War ended. But for Eleanor and Sarah, the mystery of November 23rd, 1983, remained a living, breathing entity, a constant presence in their lives. Nearly 4 decades had passed since General Miller's disappearance, turning the vivid nightmare of 1983 into a faded yet persistent scar on the landscape of Eleanor and Sarah's lives. The world outside had spun on, technologically advanced and geopolitically transformed. But for the Miller family, time had frozen around an unanswered question. Then, in the spring of 2019, far from the bustling military installations of Fort Bragg, an unexpected chain of events began to unfold in a quiet rural corner of North Carolina. A remote, almost forgotten cemetery, nestled amongst a thick cluster of old growth pines, found itself at the center of a new development project. This small, desolate graveyard, long out of use and largely unmaintained, was located near what had once been a sprawling, covert military training ground from the Cold War era. Plans for a new regional highway expansion meant that the cemetery, with its dozens of unmarked graves and weathered leaning headstones, had to be cleared. Local authorities, following standard protocol, ordered a comprehensive exhumation process to respectfully relocate any remains discovered. The spring of that year brought with it an unusual and relentless deluge of rain. Days of heavy downpours softened the earth, turning once firm ground into a muddy, unstable landscape. The relentless moisture, seeping deep into the soil, caused significant ground shifts, particularly in the older, less disturbed sections of the cemetery. It was a natural force, indifferent to the secrets buried beneath. One overcast afternoon, a lone groundskeeper, a man named Arthur Hayes, was conducting his routine inspection of the disturbed area. Arthur was a Vietnam veteran, a quiet man who found solace in the methodical rhythm of his work. He moved slowly, his boots sinking slightly into the saturated earth, his eyes scanning for signs of erosion or further ground instability. As he approached a particularly waterlogged section near a cluster of ancient oak trees, his gaze caught something unusual. The ground had clearly shifted there, revealing a fresh cut in the earth, not from any excavation equipment. Partially exposed by the raw, wet soil was a dark, almost black object. It was small, no larger than a brick, and its texture appeared unnaturally smooth against the rough, organic material of the earth. It was clearly not a rock, nor was it a root. Arthur knelt, wiping away the mud with a gloved hand, his military training instincts kicking in. The shape was distinct, rectangular, and oddly uniform. A faint, almost imperceptible gleam caught the dull light, suggesting a manufactured material rather than a natural one. He knew, with a veteran's sixth sense for things out of place, that he had stumbled upon something that did not belong in an old, forgotten burial ground. The object lay there, half hidden, a silent sentinel of a buried secret, waiting to be fully revealed. The air was still, heavy with moisture and the scent of damp earth as Arthur stood up, his mind grappling with the implications of his find. The seemingly mundane task of inspecting a shifting graveyard had just taken an unexpected and potentially profound turn. Arthur Hayes, the groundskeeper, stood over the partially exposed object, his gaze unwavering, a silent testament to the unsettling nature of his discovery. The heavy, damp air seemed to amplify the silence of the old cemetery, broken only by the drip of water from the saturated pine needles above. He knew instinctively that this was not merely an old relic or forgotten debris. Its precise, unyielding form suggested something deliberately placed, something hidden. Without hesitation, he reached for his two-way radio, the static crackle a stark contrast to the quiet surroundings. His voice, usually gruff and direct, held a note of measured caution as he reported his unusual find to the local county sheriff's office. He chose his words carefully, avoiding speculation, simply stating the facts. Unidentified object, possibly manufactured, partially exposed, appears to be an anomaly in Section C. Within the hour, a small, specialized team arrived, their vehicles navigating the muddy tracks leading to the secluded burial ground. The team consisted of a seasoned forensic anthropologist, Dr. Evelyn Reed, and two meticulous excavation specialists, all dressed in protective gear, their expressions serious. They approached the site with a quiet professionalism, the gravity of potential historical human remains always paramount. Dr. Reed, her eyes keen and experienced, surveyed the disturbed earth and the protruding object. She immediately recognized the signs of significant ground shift caused by the unusual rainfall, a natural process that had inadvertently brought something to the surface. Her initial assessment, based on the object's appearance and location, suggested it might be related to an older, perhaps unmarked grave. The excavation began with extreme care, a slow, painstaking process that contrasted sharply with the speed of modern construction. Instead of heavy machinery, the team used small trowels, brushes, and sieves, meticulously removing layers of wet, clinging soil. Each scoop of earth was examined, every fragment of debris scrutinized. The process was painstaking, driven by a deep respect for whatever secrets the ground might hold. As they slowly widened the area around the exposed object, the dark form grew clearer, revealing itself to be a remarkably well-preserved, thick leather satchel, almost entirely encased in a protective layer of hardened clay. It appeared remarkably intact, despite decades spent underground. The air grew tense with a quiet anticipation. Then, as the specialists carefully worked their way deeper, the true nature of their discovery began to emerge. Beneath the satchel, partially covered by the very earth that had held it captive for so long, human remains slowly became visible. A femur, then a pelvis, finally a partial skull, all carefully aligned, indicating a deliberate burial rather than a haphazard discard. The bones, though discolored by time and soil, appeared undisturbed for many decades. The sight brought a hush over the team. It was not just an old burial they had found. It was a burial with an accompanying, deliberately placed artifact. The presence of the satchel so intimately associated with the skeletal remains immediately elevated the discovery from a routine exhumation to a site of profound archaeological and potentially criminal significance. Dr. Reed gave a series of precise instructions, ensuring that every piece of evidence, every speck of surrounding earth, was documented and preserved. The discovery of the satchel next to the buried bones created a palpable sense of mystery, hinting at a story waiting to be told, a secret finally brought into the light by the shifting earth. The old cemetery, once a forgotten place, now held a chilling new focus for the attention of a dedicated forensic team. The discovery of the satchel lying beside the skeletal remains immediately transformed the old cemetery into a crime scene, or at the very least, a site of immense historical and forensic interest. Dr. Evelyn Reed and her team worked with a heightened sense of purpose, their movements precise and deliberate. The satchel, still caked in layers of clay and mud, was carefully documented, photographed from every angle, and then meticulously lifted from its resting place. It was immediately placed into a specialized evidence container, its journey from the damp earth to the sterile environment of the State Forensic Laboratory beginning. The transport was handled with the utmost care, a testament to the fragile nature of its contents and the potential significance it held. Upon arrival at the lab, the satchel became the subject of intense scrutiny. The air in the controlled environment was thick with anticipation as technicians, under Dr. Reed's supervision, began the painstaking process of removing the clinging dirt. Using a combination of soft brushes, specialized tools, and gentle airstreams, they slowly unveiled the object's true form. It was indeed a leather satchel, remarkably preserved by the anaerobic conditions of the clay. Its surface, though darkened by time and moisture, showed the faint marks of military-grade craftsmanship. The leather was thick, sturdy, and designed for durability, clearly intended to protect its contents from the elements. As the external layers of grime were carefully removed, the satchel's clasp, though corroded, remained surprisingly intact. With a delicate click, it was opened, revealing the objects nestled within. The first item was a heavily corroded metallic disc, clearly an identification tag. Its surface was encrusted with rust and dirt, rendering any markings invisible. Beside it lay a tarnished watch, its face obscured by grime, its leather strap decayed. The third item, and by far the most intriguing, was a smaller rectangular case made of a rigid, dark material, clearly designed to be waterproof. It appeared tightly sealed, its contents a complete mystery. The identification tag was the first priority for detailed analysis. Forensic technicians meticulously cleaned it, using gentle chemical solutions and fine brushes to carefully remove the layers of corrosion. Slowly, painstakingly, the engraved letters began to emerge from beneath the rust. The first few letters were faint, but as more of the surface was revealed, the name became clear, etched with the precision of military standard issue. Miller. Thomas. A collective intake of breath rippled through the silent lab. The name, instantly recognizable to anyone familiar with Cold War military history, sent a ripple of astonishment through the team. General Thomas Miller, the man who had vanished without a trace in 1983. Next, the tarnished watch was carefully cleaned. Its face, once polished, showed a standard military-issue design, sturdy and functional. A tiny inscription on the back, almost imperceptible to the naked eye, was discovered during the cleaning process. It read, "Property of U.S. Army, 18th Airborne Corps." This inscription further corroborated the identity, aligning perfectly with General Miller's known assignment at Fort Bragg. The revelation solidified the connection between the remains in the cemetery and the long-lost general. The final object, the sealed waterproof document case, now took on an immense significance. Its contents were unknown, but the mere fact that it had been so carefully protected and buried alongside the general suggested something of extraordinary importance. The team approached it with an almost reverent caution, knowing that what lay inside could finally, after decades of silence, reveal the full, untold story of General Thomas Miller's disappearance. The opening of that case, would be the next critical step, a moment fraught with the potential to unlock a buried truth. With the identification of General Thomas Miller confirmed, the small waterproof document case, recovered from the satchel, became the focal point of the entire investigation. Its sealed nature, designed to withstand years of burial, hinted at the profound importance of its contents. Dr. Evelyn Reed, with the meticulousness of a surgeon, directed the next critical step. The case was brought to a specialized clean room, its opening performed under sterile conditions to prevent any contamination or further degradation of what lay inside. Every movement was slow, deliberate, each tool chosen with precision. There was a palpable tension in the air, a silent acknowledgement that this moment had been decades in the making, a culmination of Eleanor Miller's enduring hope. The sealing mechanism, though old, gave way with a faint, almost imperceptible hiss as the airtight seal was broken. Inside, nestled snugly and protected from the ravages of moisture, lay a small, leather-bound ledger. Its cover, though faded and slightly warped, retained its original deep brown hue. It appeared fragile, a relic of a bygone era, yet remarkably preserved. Dr. Reed carefully lifted it out, handling it with extreme care as if it were spun from glass. The weight of the ledger in her hand felt significant, not just in its physical mass, but in the burden of the secrets it might contain. The pages within, though slightly stiff from prolonged dampness, were largely legible. General Miller's distinct, precise handwriting filled the pages, a testament to his methodical nature. It was not a personal diary, but rather a ledger of facts, dates, and names, interspersed with cryptic notes and coded references. As the forensic team began to carefully turn the fragile pages, the true nature of its contents, slowly, chillingly, began to reveal itself. It was a meticulously kept record, a secret chronicle of a covert operation that had gone catastrophically wrong. The entries detailed a sprawling network of corruption, not just within the military, but extending into seemingly legitimate government contracting firms and even a few political offices. The ledger chronicled a massive betrayal, a scheme involving the illegal diversion of military-grade equipment and advanced weaponry to unauthorized foreign entities. This was not merely financial embezzlement. It was treason, a direct compromise of national security during the height of the Cold War. General Miller's notes indicated he had been compiling evidence, building a case against powerful figures who believed themselves untouchable. There were lists of names, some familiar within defense circles, others obscure, all connected by a web of deceit. Dates were carefully recorded alongside specific transactions and the names of shell companies used to funnel illicit funds. The implications were staggering, pointing to a long-standing high-level conspiracy that had operated with impunity for years. Then, buried within the chronological entries, a chilling detail emerged. An entry, dated to the very week of General Miller's disappearance, spoke of a final meeting and a hidden location, simply referred to as Whisper Creek. It was a cryptic allusion, but the context of the surrounding entries made it clear this was to be the culminating point of his investigation, the moment he intended to confront the core of the treasonous network. The faded ledger, silent for decades beneath the earth, had suddenly become a screaming testament to a profound betrayal, a final desperate message from a man who knew his time was running out. Its contents were a roadmap to a conspiracy, a damning indictment that had waited 36 years to see the light of day. The lab, usually a place of detached scientific analysis, was now imbued with the weight of a monumental discovery, a turning point in a mystery that had long haunted a family and a nation. The moment the name Thomas Miller etched onto the identification tag and his distinct handwriting filling the pages of the secret ledger were confirmed, a seismic shift occurred within the cold case archives. General Miller's disappearance, for 36 years, relegated to the dusty shelves of unsolved mysteries, was instantly reclassified. No longer a baffling enigma, it became an active, high-priority investigation, propelled by the irrefutable evidence found literally at his side. The implications were staggering, reaching far beyond a simple missing persons case. This was now a potential assassination linked to a deep-seated conspiracy, directly implicating figures once thought beyond reproach. The somber duty of informing Eleanor and Sarah Miller fell to a carefully selected team of federal agents, led by a seasoned FBI cold case specialist, Agent Richard Vance. The meeting, held in Eleanor's modest North Carolina home, was fraught with an agonizing mix of apprehension and fragile hope. Eleanor, now a woman whose resilience had been forged in decades of uncertainty, listened with a quiet intensity as Agent Vance meticulously detailed the discovery. The remains, the satchel, the identification, and finally, the ledger. The initial shock that rippled through Eleanor and Sarah gave way to a wave of complex emotions. There was the profound grief of a confirmed loss, but beneath it, a renewed, almost disorienting sense of vindication. Thomas was not a deserter, not a man who had simply walked away. He had been silenced. This painful truth, however, brought with it the promise of closure and the distant glimmer of justice. Sarah, who had grown up with a spectral father, now faced the concrete reality of his death, and the even more concrete reality that his life had ended protecting a truth he believed in. Immediately following the emotional revelation to the family, a dedicated interagency task force was swiftly assembled. Agent Vance, recognizing the immense sensitivity and historical significance of the case, pulled together a diverse team. It included veteran FBI investigators with expertise in complex financial crimes and organized crime, alongside seasoned intelligence analysts from various federal agencies, and even a few retired military intelligence officers who remembered the Cold War era intimately. Their mission was clear: to meticulously cross-reference every name, every date, every cryptic note within General Miller's ledger against declassified government archives, old intelligence reports, and the vast, often fragmented, records of the Cold War. The scale of the task was immense, akin to piecing together a vast, decades-old puzzle with only half the pieces. The team set up a secure operations center, a hub of intense activity, where whiteboards filled with timelines, names, and arrows, tracing potential connections. They understood the gravity of their mission: to not only solve a murder, but to expose a conspiracy that had remained hidden for nearly 40 years, a dark secret buried alongside a brave man. The cold case, once a symbol of defeat, had roared back to life, its newfound urgency fueled by the silent testimony of a forgotten ledger. With the discovery of General Miller's ledger and the subsequent reopening of his cold case, the newly formed federal task force plunged into the meticulous work of deciphering its cryptic entries. Agent Richard Vance understood that every date, every name, every coded reference held the potential key to unlocking a 36-year-old mystery. The investigators began by cross-referencing the ledger's contents with every available piece of information from the Cold War era. They trawled through mountains of declassified documents, old intelligence reports, and even obscure military personnel files, searching for any overlap or hidden connections. The sheer volume of data was immense, but the precision of General Miller's notes provided an invaluable roadmap. One of the first critical leads they pursued was the enigmatic phrase Whisper Creek, mentioned in the ledger as the location for General Miller's final meeting. It was a seemingly innocuous name, yet its repeated appearance in the general's most sensitive notes suggested profound significance. After days of poring over old topographic maps and military property records, an intelligence analyst on Vance's team made a breakthrough. Whisper Creek was not a natural landmark. It referred to a secluded, abandoned cabin nestled deep within a heavily wooded, remote area of North Carolina, once part of a deactivated military training facility that had seen covert use during the 1970s and early 80s. The cabin had been an unofficial, unmarked rendezvous point, known only to a select few within the intelligence community for its absolute discretion. The realization sent a shiver through the team. This was likely where General Miller had gone, a place where he believed he could confront the architects of the conspiracy in secret. As the team delved deeper into the names listed in the ledger, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. Many of the individuals were former high-ranking military personnel, influential government contractors, or even figures who had once held minor political appointments during the Cold War. Some of these names had faded into obscurity, living quiet, unassuming lives, while others had mysteriously dropped out of public sight years ago, their retirement sudden and unexplained. Using advanced forensic data analysis and old-fashioned investigative legwork, the team began to connect the dots. They uncovered a web of financial transactions, shell corporations, and clandestine meetings that stretched back decades, all meticulously documented by General Miller. The ledger detailed a widespread, deeply entrenched network involved in the illegal diversion and sale of sophisticated military weaponry to hostile nations, a betrayal of the highest order that directly undermined national security during a period of intense global tension. General Miller had meticulously gathered evidence of this treasonous network, preparing to expose it from within. The cold, hard facts began to coalesce into a chilling picture of a conspiracy far more expansive and insidious than anyone had dared to imagine, a shadow government operating within the very heart of the nation's defense. The threads, once disparate and unrelated, were now being painstakingly woven together, revealing the true scale of the treachery that had led to General Miller's tragic disappearance. The pieces of the puzzle were finally falling into place, revealing a truth that had been deliberately buried for almost 40 years. With the intricate web of deceit meticulously mapped out by General Miller's ledger and corroborated by the task force's exhaustive research, the investigators finally had a clear picture of the conspiracy. The focus shifted from understanding the network to identifying its surviving architects. Agent Richard Vance and his team narrowed their suspects down to a handful of individuals, all of whom had held positions of power and influence during the Cold War. These were men who possessed not only the motive, the immense profits from illegal arms dealing and the fear of exposure, but also the opportunity and the means to silence a high-ranking officer like General Miller. They were powerful figures, accustomed to operating in the shadows, their reputations seemingly unblemished by time. One name stood out: Arthur Finch, a seemingly respectable former defense contractor who had, since his quiet retirement in the late 1990s, cultivated an image of a benevolent philanthropist. Finch's name appeared multiple times in Miller's ledger, always associated with the most significant and illicit transactions. He possessed the connections, the ruthlessness, and the financial empire to orchestrate such a large-scale betrayal and the subsequent cover-up. The task force began a period of intense surveillance on Finch, observing his every move, cross-referencing his current activities with the historical data from the ledger. They built a rock-solid case, compiling irrefutable evidence that linked him directly to the decades-old conspiracy. The confrontation took place not in a sterile interrogation room, but in a meticulously planned high-stakes meeting. Agent Vance, accompanied by 2 other federal agents, presented Finch with the unassailable evidence. The ledger itself, forensic reports on the general's remains, and the myriad of financial documents that trace the illegal arms transactions back to companies once controlled by Finch. The elderly man, initially composed and dismissive, slowly crumbled under the weight of the undeniable truth. His composure cracked, revealing a deep-seated fear that had festered for decades. He saw the cold, hard facts in Vance's eyes, facts he could no longer deny. Under the immense pressure of the overwhelming evidence, Finch finally confessed, his voice a strained whisper, confirming the dark truth that General Miller had died trying to expose. He revealed that General Miller had indeed traveled to the secluded Whisper Creek cabin on that fateful November day, intending to meet with Finch and other conspirators. Miller had arrived with his damning report, threatening to expose their entire operation. The conspirators, fearing utter ruin and facing lengthy prison sentences for treason, made a swift, brutal decision. General Miller was ambushed, his attempt to bring justice to light violently cut short. His assassination was swift, a desperate act to prevent the imminent exposure of their illicit enterprise. To ensure his permanent silence and to make his disappearance appear unresolved, perhaps even a defection, they secretly buried his body in the remote, forgotten cemetery, believing the earth would forever conceal their heinous crime. The ledger, carefully waterproofed, was a final, defiant act by General Miller, a testament to his determination to ensure the truth would eventually surface, even after his death. The confession, though decades late, brought a chilling clarity to the long unanswered questions, finally illuminating the dark heart of the conspiracy. Arthur Finch's confession, painstakingly recorded and corroborated by the wealth of evidence from General Miller's ledger, ripped open a decades-old wound, but it also finally provided the searing clarity Eleanor and Sarah had so desperately sought. The full extent of the Cold War conspiracy, once a whispered rumor, was now laid bare for the world to see. The names in the ledger, some still living in quiet anonymity, others long retired from public view, were pursued by federal authorities. The evidence was irrefutable, leading to a series of high-profile arrests that sent shockwaves through the nation's defense and political circles. Long-held secrets tumbled out, revealing a complex web of betrayal, greed, and a shocking disregard for national security. The public, gripped by the unfolding drama, watched as a dark chapter of history was finally brought to light. Amidst the legal proceedings and the relentless media coverage, General Thomas Miller's reputation was posthumously restored, his sacrifice finally acknowledged and honored. He was no longer the subject of vague speculation or ambiguous theories. He was recognized as a patriot who had uncovered a profound act of treason and paid the ultimate price. Ceremonies were held, quiet and dignified, acknowledging his courage and dedication. His name was etched into memorials, his story told as a testament to the unwavering integrity that had led him to his end. For Eleanor and Sarah, the official acknowledgement brought a complex mix of emotions. The decades of agonizing uncertainty had given way to a painful, yet profound sense of closure. The truth, however brutal, offered a definitive end to their long ordeal. Eleanor, her face etched with the lines of resilience, could finally mourn her husband without the gnawing doubt that had tormented her for nearly 40 years. Sarah, who had only known her father as a silent absence, now had a complete, if tragic, understanding of the man he was, a hero who had died defending his country from within. The knowledge that he had not abandoned them, but had instead been silenced for an honorable cause, brought a measure of peace. The discovery of the ledger, his final damning report, was a testament to his foresight and his determination to ensure that the truth, no matter how deeply buried, would one day emerge. It was his final message, a beacon of truth from beyond the grave, ensuring that his sacrifice would not be in vain. The story of General Thomas Miller resonated deeply with a nation that valued truth and justice. It served as a powerful reminder that secrets, no matter how carefully guarded, and truths, no matter how deeply buried, eventually find a way to surface. His enduring integrity, coupled with his family's unwavering pursuit of answers, demonstrated that persistence can indeed overcome even the most formidable obstacles. The combination of preserved evidence, advancements in forensic science, and the relentless dedication of a family refusing to give up converged to unlock a truth that many believed would remain hidden forever. General Miller died fulfilling his duty, exposing corruption that threatened the very fabric of his country's security, and his sacrifice was finally recognized. The forgotten cemetery, the shifting earth, and the hidden satchel had all played their part in uncovering a legacy of courage and a conspiracy that had cast a long shadow over American history. The resolution offered not only justice for General Miller, but also a profound reflection on the enduring power of truth.